what's the name? Who gets number 3? You hear, you speak, you just never see. I'm gonna raise this place, take a good over praise. Do you want it?
Hello, colleagues of every kind and description. This is me, Paul Colby, and this is Public Affairs Public Access, and tonight is the 18th of June in the year 2015 for those of you historians tapping into the database to figure out what went wrong or what went right, because right here, right now, we don't know how it's going to turn out. Anyway, we editorial plural, us, being here tonight, always try to give all of you out there, colleagues one kind or another, a glimpse at things that are going on around town, around the globe, with emphasis on things that are being underreported or not reported at all, because other people, other organizations don't have the resources that I do, let's just put it at that, the resources to get to the bottom of some of these stories using highly confidential informants or, well, I can't really explain all of the techniques we use, but you're familiar with the kind of information we dig up on your behalf. And tonight will be just another circus of errors and a review of possibilities, because that's what we're here to do. Inform and, in some ways, enlighten now and then, in some ways. Anyway, that being said, we're going to start with a review of what's been going on around these parts, and then we'll spread out our focus and cover some larger issues. But around here, and I mean the state of Texas, one of the things that's just happened is that the governor has signed into law a bill that protects pastors. Yes, protecting pastors is important in the modern age because a lot of men of the cloth, and I suppose a few women as well, think that they are in a situation where their beliefs are being compromised in as much as they're being asked to do things that they don't believe in and that they believe they shouldn't be doing at all. Well, let me tell you, this Protecting the Pastors bill, which the governor signed after the men of the cloth descended on the state capitol, does some interesting things. Primarily, it says that clergy can't be asked to perform a ceremony they don't believe in, but it also includes, in addition to clergy, any sorts of religious institutions that might be associated with the person of the cloth, meaning day camps and whatever, you know. So, we know what this is about. This is so that people don't have to officiate at gay weddings. Right. That's what this is about, and that says in advance of some possible other ruling coming from higher up that says this is the law of the land. Texas has already been working to make it difficult for gay marriages to happen here. But the first thing that occurs to me is that if someone wants to get married, and if that starts to become a possibility, they're not likely to go to a man of the cloth who is opposed in principle. Not when there are other persons out there ready to make a buck and feeling differently about the situation, about traditional marriage versus these new civil society renditions, who will already perform such weddings. I'm sure you've seen signs around town like I have that indicate there are churches and individuals, actually I'm a minister myself, who will perform gay marriages. They'll even bake the cakes. And incidentally, while we're talking about that, you know, the real contest that got some of this underway, the momentum that we're seeing right now for a federal mandate of some sort, was the issue of businesses deciding that they didn't have to, for example, bake cakes that would be used at a gay marriage. Well, you know, I suppose that's a special case, but when you go in business for providing a service to a public, then generally speaking, things are a little different than if you're officiating at a wedding per se. I mean, we don't, for example, tell people that we can't sell them French fries because of their beliefs. But, you know, in the climate in America today, you just wonder how far some people want to push this as much as other people want to push for opening up the society and treating everyone with equal respect and equal legal protection. All of that being said, the surge here, well, it comes in two parts. One, Ireland just gave a blessing to gay marriage, and to great hoopla, to celebrations in Ireland. You know, they were out there on the leading edge, they were. And it's also expected now that there are going to be court decisions. Either the President of the United States or the Supreme Court is about to say something about this issue of gay marriage. Not just civil unions, but gay marriage, its legality, and so forth. And we know that, that most people have beliefs that are pretty firmly set at this point. They generally are rooted in whether somebody's outlook is conservative and in embracing only the traditional view of marriage, or if they think things need to be more expansive. Because, for example, there was a time when mixed race marriages were a real oddity, curiosity. There was a time when marriages between people of different religions, that raised an eyebrow. Not so much now. We seem to be, those of us who are expanding to include more. But this being said, the debate that's going on is fueled by some literature out there. You may have seen some of it. There's a book about the Supreme Court itself that came to my attention just recently. The Gay Supremes and the Road to Ruin. And the author of this book, Memphis Quabble, has some pretty strange beliefs. I'm not sure if he's suggesting that the Supremes, or some of the Supremes, are leaning in a certain way because of certain personal preferences, but you know, people can say just about whatever they want in a book. And for that reason, you will find even stranger explanations for why this issue of gay marriage is gaining steam right now. One of the oddest that I'm aware of is a work by a gentleman named Barnes de la Four, who believes that aliens have an agenda. I mean, extraterrestrials, not the immigrants that, you know, well, we'll probably talk some more about them later. Anyway, extraterrestrials, he thinks, and there are others who think like him, have a master plan, and somehow promoting gay marriage fits into some agenda about ripping up the social fabric, if you can get his drift. I frankly can't. As we say this now, obviously, there are cases out there already where people have pushed the boundaries of a normal marriage, mostly by marrying something other than another human. I'm sure you've heard about some of these things. The Cynthia Daub case is interesting. At least that's what we think her real name is, but a book has hit the shelves just recently, I Married a Train Wreck, and it's under a pseudonym there. But we know it's Cynthia Daub, I think. When her story first came to light, people thought, when she said, I married a train wreck, that she was talking about a failed marriage with a husband who couldn't get it together. But it turns out she really did marry a train wreck. She married a train wreck. And if you're more interested in this story than what I've said so far, then I'm sure there's somebody out there on the internet who's dug deeply into this question. Or another question similar to it. You know the guy Rudolf Feist. Rudolf Feist was one of the first people to marry an appliance, and it was a typewriter, actually. He was a writer of sorts. He didn't write his own biography for a number of reasons, but anyway, things didn't work out with the typewriter. He ended up divorcing that and marrying a washing machine, and I think an air conditioner, and God knows what all. Some of that is covered in Cynthia Dobbs' book, but that's a bizarre case too. And there's a really strange one that's probably going to wind up in court soon, because it involves a guy who is now married to a robot. And you'll probably see a court ruling on this because his wife is taking him to court. It's some kind of custody issue or wanting half the money or something. I really haven't been able to find out what's at the heart of it, but she is claiming that he is now married to another female, and he is saying, no, he's not, because it's just a machine, it's a robot. He's now married to a simulated female, but she's entirely mechanical, and as a matter of fact, it's not the robot he started with. He's had to use some spare parts to make her work out, but it's strange when we start pushing the boundaries of marriage like this. So some people do have a point in being worried, but this whole idea of protecting pastors, you know, it's about protecting religious beliefs, and there are other religious beliefs out there beyond gay marriage that certain lobbies are probably going to now start promoting their own interest with respect to the legal procedure. What do I mean? Well, for example, you may have heard of the Travelers. This is a fairly small religious body, but these people, they drive around a lot, but they do not respect the authority of any sort of traffic signal, a stop sign or a real flashing light, nothing like that. They believe that their creator, somebody named Zalkik B or something like that, will protect them when they're in traffic. And so they refuse to stop unless they are impelled to stop by some reasoner inside. I think they call it the reasoner. These people have been asking for rights, mostly in Miami and Fort Lauderdale and a few places like that, but it could be unusual if they ask for more rights. Now another group, well, it's calling itself a religion. I think it's a group, but the Cows for Concern is a larger religious cult. They also go by the name of corporate bigwigs pretending to be Citizens United, and they really are cash cows for a lot of political candidates. In other words, they finance a lot of what goes on in the government, and that's why, you know, well, corruption. We'll be talking a lot about corruption tonight. We have corruption because of these people, but they have a religious belief, they say in a court proceeding filed, I believe, in Alabama, that it is against their religious beliefs to say who they gave money to. They won't disclose their contributions. Isn't that unusual? Just when you thought that campaign finance was a possibility, well, not if these guys get their way. And another religious group that really bothers me is the Church of Non-Scientology. These are some folks who they just don't believe in any of the main understandings of modern science. They just deny them, and, well, come to think of it, they probably won't be asking for any special religious favors because they have control of the entire Republican presidential candidate field, don't they? Anyway, We've talked a lot now here about this issue of protecting the pastors and why they're protecting the pastors and the religious implications beyond what we know now and the marital implications beyond what we know now. But even though Texas could protect pastors with legislation, our good servants in the legislature decided, and the governor added his 2 cents, that we could not protect our pastures, those are farmlands, from being fracked upon, if you know what I mean. Denton tried to do it. You see where they got. The law now says you can't stop us from fracking where we want. Just because you're a county or a local government. Too bad, Steve. Well, that's my 2.5 cents on that subject. But that's not the only thing going on in Texas. There's another thing going on in Texas. Right up the road here, July 15, a military training operation called Jade Helm. And in these kind of training operations, as you probably know, the military, especially some of the special branches, do some simulations right there in the middle of civilian traffic and right there in the middle of civilian populations and rural areas and even cities. This has been going on for a long time, but this particular military operation apparently has a bunch of folks in Texas really on edge, such that the governor has assured them by saying that the Texas State Guard is going to monitor the military activities that are going on in July. Monitor. Now, why are people so upset? Well, you may have seen this, the map we've got here. One of my right-wing so-called conspiracy type associates brought it to me the other day. He points out that what was obviously a Department of Defense training manual that indicated forthcoming martial law, you can see it's crossed out now and it just says Jade Helm. So there is a belief among many people out there that something is afoot here and that Texas is going to be subjected to some really bad weather. Now, bad weather, incidentally, that's an interesting phrase to use here. They believe, these conspiratorial theorists, that, for example, the unbelievable wet season we've had, the massive flooding, with 2 weeks ago, whole areas underwater, and now 2 weeks later, another assault from Tropical Storm Bill. They just think that there must be something going on where the military or some arm of the government is punishing Texas or weakening it up so that it can be easily overturned. Frankly, I just don't see it, especially since Tropical Storm Bill just barely got my porch wet. So if that's, but anyway, they make the case that after all that time that Governor Abbott, then the Attorney General of Texas, spent suing the federal government over issues involving the EPA that, many of us, I can't say most of us here in Texas, disagreed with, they feel that some sort of revenge is being taken out on the state and that we're actually going to have martial law here. Now, frankly, in my mind, ever since 9/11, we've had martial law here. They call it they used to call it the Patriot Act, and I guess I'll be getting into some of that a little bit later. But, you know, martial law per se, I didn't believe that so much, you know, military occupation as such, until I came across a very interesting blog post on the internet the other day. I mean, this really stirred me. The whole thing's not here, but you can see the point. Someone is writing, and I'm not going to name the state. I don't want to alarm people. I'm not going to tell you where the military has already taken over, but they're saying that life here is not so bad. They did take the guns away. The people are eating rations, but the viceroy is a fun guy, and the kids enjoy not having to go to school. So as far as me and my highly paid and highly intelligent staff have been able to determine so far, it appears that 1 and possibly 16 American cities are now under military occupation. But I just thought you might like to know in case you see some unusual people walking around in your neighborhood. That's enough talk about Jade Helm. Here's another interesting sort of sidelight to what's going on. Some of you like organic food, right? Yeah, you're kind of healthy in mind and body, and so you like healthy food, and especially organic foods. You probably went to health food stores of the type, let's say similar to a Whole Foods or something, to get them when your regular grocery store chains didn't have them. And as a result, some of these health food type stores worked out some pretty good symbiotic relations with organic farmers when they were the only ones selling organic foods and stuff that could carry a label that said it was grown organically. But now the grocery stores, the big grocery stores, the regular, so the underground Walmarts, ha ha ha. Anyway, now that organic food is showing up in a lot of these places, there's price competition going on, and so the health food type outlets don't have a monopoly on organic foods anymore. And so to stay in the game, competitively speaking, they're going to more standard products that you might buy in a grocery store just as a way of surviving, and they are calling these not organic but responsibly grown. Now, responsibly grown doesn't really have any legal meaning at this point. So, some of the things you see on these labels, when it says that it's responsibly grown, I noticed one saying grown in an area where no trombone players were tortured. And that's important to me, of course. And another, grown in an area where dogs are taught a second language. Well, that's nice, but the one that really got me lately, I was getting some organic rutabaga the other day, and look, I just passed the dog food aisle. I got some horse meat helper, and I looked at the label. The attendants in the area where it's grown were properly clad, for the most part. So, I don't know if you can trust these new labels about grown responsibly to speak for very much. Anyway, there's also news over at the international airport here in Houston, a new air carrier, Air Nippon from Tokyo, offering one-way service, direct service. I guess that's big news at the airport. I'm glad to see there's some activity going on here that's good for the economy, but I'll tell you what, airports and airlines have been nobody's favorite since 9/11, really, since all of the security measures we've had to endure were stacked on top of other silly stuff. One thing, these days it's tough getting on a plane. You go through the scanners, and you take off your shoes, and you take off your belt, and you take out your cell phone and all your change, and God knows you spend as much time at the airport as you do in the air getting somewhere. But some people these days are being subjected to even stranger, I don't even know what to call it. I haven't had a cavity search yet, but then again, I don't know if I have average-sized equipment that would tip them off to get me in that line. Anyway, one thing, some people complain the airlines have just priced themselves out. Even when oil prices went down, did you see the price of the fuel surcharge going down? No, you didn't. And when you get on a plane, You get crammed in like you're sardines in a can, to use that old expression. On my last flight out to Pittsburgh, researching one of these subjects for you, I happened to take a look at what it said there, the occupancy on the wall. Only 24 people were supposed to be on that plane. How many, or you know, it also had it in pounds. So how many planes have you been on that have a couple of dozen people? It's more like, you know, 124 people every time I got on a plane. So airlines, because of all this bad PR, because people are kind of testy about having to even be on an airline, they're offering some specials these days. And here from an internet site, I'm not going to name the airline. You can look it up if you want, and you probably have even thought about some of these, but I got to warn you about some of these fares. The Wing It fare, that's a popular one on Houston to Dallas flights now. But the Wing It fare, you should bring a sweater because you will be riding on the wing. Now you do have something along the lines of a seat belt, more or less, but I'll tell you, those things move pretty fast and it's not very comfortable. Not comfortable at all. Another fare you may have noticed, it's a lot cheaper, the I Can Hold It fare. Well, most of your air travel today, if you get anything to eat at all, it's peanuts. So there's not very much dinner on a flight, and some airlines, to save you money, will offer you the chance to fly on a plane that has no restroom facilities. So if you can hold it, then that's a pretty good deal. But for example, I don't think I'd take the Houston to LA, maybe the Houston to Dallas. I understand they've had some problems with floodwaters. Oh, I'm thinking of the flood, yes. There's also the I Missed It fare, and this is an unusual one. I'm not sure how many people would really be interested because, for example, if you didn't make the Thursday flight, say to Dallas, you can, on Friday, you can buy it real cheap. What that would accomplish, I'm not sure, but so you're not going anywhere, but you do get pictures on this flight. So that's what I think of the airlines. They're not exactly doing you any favors. Anyway, that's what's going on in Texas. Let's spread out to some other states. One problem Texas has, but other states have, is idle rigs because of what's going on in the oil industry today. And notice I'm not saying idle rigs like American Idol, where something was rigged recently and a talking fish. I didn't even see this one. It must have been pretty interesting because the talking fish was supposed to make a movie and now he's in a rest home. I don't really know too much about that, but anyway, the idle rigs, the ones that drill for oil and gas, and the ones that drill. Well, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's about 50 of them that are idle right in the vicinity, and as I say, other states have this issue too. So what are you going to do with this equipment that you can't use? Well, leave it to the people who think these things through and have kind of an entrepreneurial bent. It turns out that you can use the parts from one of these rigs to pretty much fabricate an entire sports stadium. I went to look at a couple yesterday because I was told about this, and sure enough, all of the parts that were being used in these stadiums came from some drilling rigs that were taken apart. Yes, sir, they were taken apart. And that's not the only novel use I found. A lot of people like amusement rides, and there is, in a nearby county here, it's in Hidalgo County or someplace in Texas now, I think they're putting up one of the largest bungee drops in the state. I think it's a half a mile high, built from an old drilling rig, and this one too, you're advised, well, anyway, there's no seat belt on this one, so you're advised. And the old stand by the roller coaster. I mean, these things just, you can almost see the rig that it used to be when you look at it now. You can see that right now. Before I get to what I think is the most novel use of all, I want to tell you that one entrepreneurial idea that did not work out was drilling in the dental sense, because some people figured that these rigs, being as large as they are, could do the drilling, the dental drilling, on very large land mammals. As it turns out, and I think they probably could have figured this out just by going to an encyclopedia or watching a science show, but maybe they were non-Scientologists. There's just very few brontosaurus or any of these types running around these days, and the people who own the very few that I know of, they already have dental plans, and I can't explain those dental plans. But the most amazing use I've seen for these oil rigs, there are some artists in parts of California, and they're thirsty, and I'll get to that in a minute. Some artists in California are able to take the spare parts from these idle rigs and create almost perfect representations of some giant lizards, and they're the lizards that are, well, I'm not sure of what they're doing. Ed, do we know? No, I guess we don't know, but they certainly look like real lizards to me. So anyway, that's what to do with your drilling rig. And if those rigs could just drill for water in California, that would probably help. So, you may be quite aware of the drought situation in California. I mean, bad scene. In California, the government, Governor Brown and the other parts of the government have already put in place a 25% cut. And Governor Brown was saying recently the days of watering your pretty lawn are over. Well, if people follow the law, they're over. You know how people are. You're going to take that hose out of my cold, clammy, however that goes. But some of the rich people in California aren't bothered at all, and I'll tell you why. You remember what we used to have for grass in the Astrodome? Yes, AstroTurf. Then artificial turf started getting used in stadiums all over the country, and then with a lot of sports injuries, it started to fall out of favor, and now a lot of stadiums are getting rid of their artificial turf and replacing it with real grass anymore. A case in point, out there, New England Patriot Act Stadium. Some of you have probably been there. It's a swell facility, but it's being remodeled now and being turned into the 8 Mile High Stadium. And one thing they've done is they've torn out all of the artificial turf, and so the rich people in California aren't worried about their lawns at all. They've just bought, big patches and put it down, and boy, if there's a low maintenance product for a front yard, this is it. We might have to consider it in the central part of Texas if we ever dry out again from this latest rain massage. Some of the things that the governor has asked people to do in California are a little disturbing. He's asked people to pee outside, and what he said is, we have to kind of get over our social, our hostility to the concept. There's other societies, even parts of Europe, where people wouldn't be bothered by, well, anyway, it's not an idea Americans like. But since Americans are thirsty, and the ones in California are going to have to do certain things with their water, not only drink it, but bathe and whatever. The governor has urged them to start moving to non-water-based liquids. And I didn't know there was such a thing, so of course me and the staff looked it up. It didn't take long to come across some of the products that are out there. I guess some health nuts are the ones who who created a market like this in the first place, but right now you can get plenty of these non-water-based liquids. They're expensive, but if you want to change your diet and move in that direction in anticipation of a drought, you know, kind of practice up for it, well, you can start buying them, mostly online, of course. Another thing the governor did that I don't understand, he's initiated a ban on surfing. What that will do, I'm not sure, unless they have in mind some massive desalination project that nobody knows about, or that failed because the drilling rigs sank, or whatever. But anyway, I don't think that keeping people from surfing is going to have a whole lot of effect on that crisis. One thing that might help is if some of that junk water from fracking could be distilled into real drinking water, they'd be better off. Here's to you, California. Now, things are happening also in Spokane. The head of the NAACP in Spokane turns out to be a Caucasian woman who's had people thinking for quite a long time that she's a black woman. Interesting case this is. I mean, this is pretty disturbing. I mean, this pretending, you know, is part of the American, I mean, but this is more serious than a bunch of people at Fox pretending to be news anchors, for example, or reporters. This kind of goes against the grain in many ways. One thing here that Rachel Dolezal has started is a kind of a backlash among people that really don't have any choice. And not that she didn't do good work doing what she did, but she seems to be a pathological liar at a level that that few public figures. Well, I'll have to take that back. We do in politics have some, but as I say, this is a different ball of wax entirely. One thing she's said lately in response to specific questions, or in evading specific questions, was that she was raised in a teepee. And of course her parents said that's not true, but as usual, these things inspire other people. So there's a punk rock band led by Racial Prejudice, who has just released, and frankly to me, talk about pretending, it looks like some guy to me pretending to be a woman named Racial Prejudice. But their song Raised in a Teepee is a big hit. I mean, what passes for a big hit these days? So anytime one of these things happens, somebody starts using their creative nonfiction to change their past, then copycats will take something that's bad already and make it worse. And if that weren't enough, you know, one of these comments from her that really got to me, I mean, this was once again in response to a question that she was evading. She was specifically asked, what is her race? And she said, human. Well, who among us would have any problem saying that? I mean, we're all part of the human race. I mean, well, I have to take that back. Some of you are familiar with other conspiracy theories. People like David Icke and others have said that, you know, the lizards, the shape-shifting lizards from other parts have been here for a long time pretending to be human. And there is a book on this subject, I Passed for Human. It's by this entity called Zoclic 2-1. Now, where have I heard that name before? In connection with one of those religions, I think. Anyway, I remember his book, I Passed for Human, and I passed for 2,200 yards in one season. So I guess that makes him a pathological liar as well. But anyway, I just hate it when people pretend, unnecessarily. I mean, you've got to justify that kind of behavior to me. Some people, though, pretending to be someone else, I can understand why they're doing it. What's going on in New York right now? You've got some escaped convicts, some killers, some escaped convicts avoiding avoiding the authorities. Somehow they're hiding in plain sight, I suppose, and they're probably, well, first of all, before we talk about the disguises they're probably wearing, there's a lot of talk that that they had help, from a particular woman who brought them things and set it up, and her husband is threatened with being killed if they got out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think they necessarily needed any outside help, because when I was walking the dogs the other day, I looked up at a blimp, and the messages they have up there. This one was talking about going to the website leaveprison.com for details on how you can break out of prison, and I checked it out. Wasn't too expensive. Some of the courses were only like $19.95, so I suppose the guys in prison could just download them if they've got $19.95. And anyway, once they get out, to keep from being captured, they have to pretend to be somebody else, i.e., they have to come up with disguises. And there's the famous case of Rodney, I forgot his name, Rodney something, and his wife Stewart, who escaped from a New Mexico prison and disguised themselves as lizards, and they actually sat right there on the wall of the police station for weeks, nobody realizing that's who they were, until finally all the frenzy died down, and then they just left. That's one of the most successful disguises I've ever heard of, but not the only one. There was another couple, and I forget their names, but I did find the picture on the internet the other day. One convict in particular escaped disguised as a cow, and I forgot what his partner was disguised as. But in this picture, for example, I bet you can't tell which one is the escaped convict and which ones are the real cows, because and incidentally, on the leaveprison.com site, they had all sorts of disguises available. The one I like the best, because this happened in an office complex where I worked. We were way high up, about 40 floors up. Turned out that there was an ex-convict. He'd been on the lam for 10 or 12 years already. He disguised himself as a falcon, and he stayed up there pretty high off the ground. He could always see where law enforcement was. While they were looking for him, he was able to observe them, and observe them without being noticed himself. So I hope they catch those guys, but understand that, well, escaped convicts, they'll do anything to stay out there. By the way, before I close this discussion of, breaking out of jails and prisons, there's something I want you to keep in mind. It was brought to my attention the other day that a startling percentage, something like 11% these days, of the people in prisons and mostly jails are people who broke in, not out, because they are homeless and no future. So they figure this way they at least get shelter and then food and water if they break into jail. Although in California, of course, they wouldn't get water necessarily, but but anyway. Well, on the national scene, the biggest news and what's disturbing to me most is that the Patriot Act is supposed to have gone away, and there was a giant public push. I guess a bunch of you, my friends out there, were part of that push, and it looked like we were going to get it dumped out you know, the whole thing. But to no avail, these efforts, because it got replaced now with the USA Freedom Act, the Freedom Act. It's kind of hard to tell the difference, but those who have looked at the bill real close think it's worse. You may not be able to look at it that close, though. Try to go online like I did. See what you see there on the cover? That's right, friends. The act that's out there for you to read may not be the real enchilada. You see what I'm saying? But it's disturbing. That's what it is. It's disturbing to me. The main thing that they seem to have done here in the Freedom Act version of the Patriot Act is to turn some of the dirty business over to corporations. In other words, they have to go ask the phone company for your records instead of doing it themselves, they being the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, and the 11 other unnamed and unknown to most people agencies that are tracking every aspect of your life. But yeah, that's an improvement, giving it to the corporations, isn't it? I thought you'd agree with me there. I want to tell you what I was able to find out, because even though you can't see the whole thing, my staff was able to get some bootleg copies of the real law. And one thing I notice is that right now things are pretty personalized. They're pretty personalized. In fact, I went to the deep web, tell you the truth. Most of you maybe have heard of that, but you haven't actually been there. And I turned up almost by accident in a word search my own surveillance instructions that are part of this new USA Freedom Act. And I was disappointed that, well, it's these days, if you're not under particular surveillance, then you're pretty much a nobody, So I was disappointed that I could only find 4 amendments to my previous surveillance package here, but they are, they're not nice. I mean, for one thing, anytime I go cruising, I know that I will be photographed, and they also will rework the wiring in my automobile after every oil change. I guess that's because they have some primitive system that one of my spark plugs must be messing up. And in other words, as they try to wire me for sound, anyway, I encourage you to go take a look there at your own personal surveillance file if you can find it. You may not be able to. Now, there are some provisions in here I want to warn you about, because you probably haven't heard about this. You probably just hear the regular stuff that they tell you on the nightly news about what's new in the Freedom Act, but not the bad news. Now, it's going to be a kind of a criminal and a treasonous act, the sort of an act of a terrorist, if you badmouth certain people using certain language, and this starts about June 1. So, for example, if I wanted to call Dick Cheney, say, for example, a jerk bottom or a fart wheel or, a relic of a sick era, then I better get it out of my system by September 1st, after which time I would be committing some sort of an act that I guess Ed Snowden hasn't gotten around to printing that. I bet he knows about it, though. And I bet one reason that they pushed him to the brink is probably, and treated him so badly, is that he called somebody a jerk bottom. I mean, that's my bet. I can't prove that. Anyway, that's not all the bad news. I mean, used to be they would only watch certain people who are actually dangerous. Now they're kind of expanding their net, so to speak. And they want to go after people who make subtle distinctions. They think that those people are dangerous. Like, let me read this, for example, where this is quoting the actual text of the act. So, for example, a whale and a catfish are pretty much the same thing, and people who make unnecessary subtle distinctions need to be monitored, since their behavior and their beliefs, and then it trails off. The rest is redacted. But personally, I'm worried about that because I make a lot of distinctions. For example, I think my refrigerator is somewhat different than the little cooler that I take with me when I want to booze it up at a football game, or, you see what I mean? So I make some of these distinctions. Anyway, that's on the national scale. Another thing on the national scale right now, women on currency. Yes, the possibility is there that one of our $10 or $20 or $50,000 bills will have women on it, and I guess that's pretty good news. So when this first got mentioned, a lot of people were saying, well, what we need is like someone like Mother Teresa should be the first woman on our official currency. Of course, those people probably were not reflecting on the fact that Mother Teresa is not an American as such. Okay? So while it might be a good idea, well, the discussion has since then moved on to something like Mother Nature, okay, as a universal female symbol. But frankly, I think there's too many sides to and aspects to Mother Nature. They don't really work on paper currency so much, and besides, that's why we have so many stamps with nature pictures. I think Mother Nature is fine with that. The same people who are protecting themselves against gay marriage also are a strong lobby for making sure that whatever woman gets on our currency, she is fully clothed, or they, if there's more than one. Since the government is interested in new currency, by the way, I submitted some of my own bad hair pictures. I mean, I figure maybe they'll take bad hair pictures too, and I can be part of the lousy $1 that people spend on ridiculous things. I mean, spend a lousy $1 to get just a bottle of some of these non-water liquids and stuff. So anyway, but eventually we'll get some currency that has women on it, or maybe inanimate objects. I mean, a lot of people would rather have robot parts on their currency, and I don't really have a strong opinion. I mean, if it works for them, pretty much, but I'd put that on the 50,000s dollar bills. And there's another scandal going on, FIFA scandal, yes sirree, world football. Some people might wonder why our ours is not the only actual action against this massive football organization, but we might wonder why the United States is going after FIFA. Well, obviously, plenty of good reasons, I mean, in terms of corruption, etc., but I believe it's because it's easier than dealing with our own white-collar criminals, on Wall Street, where, they're basically cash cows for both the Republican and Democratic Party. And so they get, a ticket, free ride, get out of jail free. Probably shouldn't mention that in the context we're discussing it, but they do seem to get a free ride, don't they? Anyway, I guess that's why the AG went after FIFA. But you know what happened? FIFA's president, Sepp Blatter, resigned. And that excited a whole bunch of Republican presidential candidates because they are not doing very well in the polls at all. Nobody seems to be interested in coming to their speeches. They're not very well attended. And so the first thing that they thought is, hey, let's see, maybe we can run for president of FIFA, if not the U.S., huh? And that might work, but these numbers, they really are anemic. I mean, if you look at all of these candidates, and for God's sakes, that's a lot of candidates, everybody's numbers are anemic. I mean, starting at a 10% approval down to Ted Nugent at the bottom, dragging it down to a 0.2%. So these guys know it doesn't look like they're going to get themselves elected with numbers like this. But they have their strategists, you know, their brain trust, the people who go in there and figure out what to do when things are really bad. And this turned out to be one of those simple numbers games where it was easy to turn everything around just with a change in perspective, because these guys decided that if they run all together as the Sweet 16, then their approval rating, just add them up, goes up to about 85%. And when you have that kind of numbers, well, things are looking a whole lot better on this side of the street. So expect that, and if you think I'm just speculating and feeding you a line, well, they played the trump card just the other night, didn't they? Ha ha. Other big thing on the national agenda these days, Obama's trade deal. There was resistance to it, I think, from some people who misunderstood and thought it was a trans-Pacific partnership, you know, another one of those gay marriage type tricks. But they got past that. What they found out that I think has made a lot of people try to stop this in its tracks is that this is really about trading. In fact, there is a Pacific, and I won't identify this country, but they want to trade this, our Palm Beach, for this little shanty town somewhere where they manufacture, they manufacture some sort of sweaters. No, I don't think it is. Anyway, nobody wants to trade that for that. That's kind of what slowed down this deal, of course, but American corporations will get back on board because they need some place to sell their trash. Yeah, I mean, to sell their products that aren't selling well here. And finally, let me just tell you one thing. You've heard about Chinese-linked hackers breaking into government databases, and God knows what they took. Well, another trip to the deep net, I found a website that offers federal government files for free, almost free. And I bet I know what they came up with. I'm interested in Taylor Swift's hat size, which they promise I can have for almost nothing, and also a raccoon chili recipe and a list of all the phone numbers on America's Mars base. I've always wanted to go there. Anyway, there's so much more going on, but that's all we could get to for tonight, folks. So I hope you leave home now, or leave for home if you're still working, for goodness sake. Yeah, if you're still working, you should leave for home, and otherwise you should leave home because it's getting pretty dangerous out there. So if you do go outside, you might consider a disguise, but don't pretend to be somebody you aren't. And also watch out when somebody offers you a good deal, because we've discussed a few of them, and they're not that great when you look at the fine print. And that's what we always do when I show up here on Public Affairs, Public Access. I bring you the efforts of my staff and myself to read the fine print so you don't have to, especially if you have to wear glasses. Good night, everybody.
Picture yourself and 213 of your close friends on a slow boat to China. The suit that you're wearing has cantaloupe stains. Yuck. And suddenly, someone is serving you papers. And who knows what he has for brains? I certainly do not. Incidentally, over there by the statue